Alright, hello, welcome back to another Dragon Ball Gekishin Squadra video here. So I did get all of my sorta, trying out the new characters for the first time videos out, and I do think they did a pretty good job with all of the new characters. And I did say, I believe in the first one, at least early into those, I did already have the idea that I did want to do a sort of tier list, ranking how good all the characters in the game are. So, I mean, obviously, that is what we are doing here. Now, I do think, like, this game has a lot of promise. I've had a lot of fun with it so far. I also think there are several systems, characters, whatever, that need adjusted. So I mean, by the time we get the next network test or whatever, we'll see exactly what's what with it. Things are definitely in a very fluid state with the game as it's not actually out right now. So I mean, we'll have to see. But this is, obviously right after this current June network test ended. So I did want to get this out, my thoughts now. And then, obviously once it comes back around, maybe another beta test, official game release, whatever. I'll do another one then after getting some more experience with the characters. But that being said, I feel like I've played all of these characters a decent bit. I mean, it was only up for what, like 3-4 days, so there's only so much time. But I think I got a good like 10 to 15. Some characters even like upwards to 20 games in, both for the older characters as well as the newer ones. So I do think I have a pretty good idea of how I feel about them. But obviously, more experience is always better, and for some of these characters especially, I do think they do require true mastery in order to be able to be played at their max. Now that being said, I'm just going to start from the bottom, go up, give sort of my thoughts on the character, and then obviously continue up the list. I do want the sort of tiers to be ordered, so how that's going to be is the rightmost characters are going to be the worst within that tier, if that makes any sense. So the more left we're going on the tier list here, that's, I think, the character's better. So these are ordered in tiers, as well as the tiers themselves have ordering. So starting out though, I do have Gohan. So Gohan, I mean, I feel like just pretty much everyone more or less agrees that he's like the worst character in the game. Now I do have quotes for bad, and I will say right now, Gohan's actually the only character I have in bad. I do think for just like the bad tier and even somewhat the mid tier, there needs to be like adjustments or buffs for the characters. Uh, Gohan especially, he just really stands out. So I figured it was worth giving him his own tier. Now in this game, I mean, the level leads are so important that, I mean, even Gohan down here could probably take down who I think is like the best character in the game. If you have a 2-level lead or something, right? I mean, the level lead in this game is very important. But I don't know. Just Gohan feels like he doesn't really do anything. He doesn't really feel like he specializes anything. He doesn't, not like good supporting, not good damage, not like he just sort of exists. I don't really, I don't know. I feel like they need to change his numbers, change his kit. I don't know exactly, but he feels like pretty noticeably, I think, because I've seen what other people have said online, and I mean, it's not just me. I mean, a lot of people think Gohan's like the worst character. So I think they need to look into that. Now I think it is worth saying I've played a decent bit of this game's a sort of MOBA, right? So I've played a decent bit of League of Legends. Uh, my my account level's up there like 500 or something. So I've played a lot of MOBA. Well, specifically League, but I have a lot of experience with this sort of genre. Even with just one game. But that being said, even with just League, I'm not really a big fan of like supporting characters. I really do like tank characters myself. That's my sort of, everyone has their different sort of power fantasies, right? Um, but I don't know. I've never really been a big support technical player, so I do acknowledge there is some sort of inherent bias with that. But I just Gohan, especially like I don't think it's just bias. Like he doesn't really do much. So I think he needs buffed. I think he needs changed. We'll have to see. Oh, that's another thing, real quick here. I do have a character or two that I do feel like might have been changed. But for the old characters, for the game, when it was still called Project Multi, I'm not really sure if there's been that many changes. I mean, it has been a while since the last beta, so maybe I'm just not really picking up on them. But and it could just be like tiny number changes. But besides, with the exception of like one character in particular, really, I don't really think they've been adjusted that much. So I mean, hopefully they do add an actual balance team. Uh, once the game starts coming out. I don't know if they have one right now, but I think they need one. But I think that's enough said about Gohan. Let's start out with our sort of worst character in the mid tier. And that I do think is Frieza. So Frieza is pretty unique. I think he's pretty fun, honestly. I've played, and like I said, I did get a decent bit of games in with all the characters just to really iron out my thoughts on them. I do know, once again, I'm not a technical sort of player. But even within the technical class, I mean, Frieza has a very unique identity with like playing around his minions. And I do think like Zarbon and Dodoria, I mean, they could do some crazy stuff. I mean, like Dodoria saved my life so many times from like bouncing enemies away, or like Zarbon just blasting them. I mean, it's huge. The debuffs they have are pretty strong. He's incredibly fast. Like Frieza, I think he has a lot of pretty cool tools. But what I think really holds Frieza back is Frieza's damage specifically is pretty poor. Like Zarbon and Dodoria do really insane damage, but Frieza himself, like his sort of rush attack, I don't think like his ult does too much damage really either. So it's just like Frieza in general doesn't do a lot of damage, which I mean, if you're sort of a supporting character, that's fine. But I think it also starts to fall apart once you consider I'm pretty confident he has like the lowest health pool in the game. And then his minions aren't really that tanky either. I mean, they're all pretty much one shot for most of the competent attackers with abilities, right? So, I mean, it's pretty rough. I think his HP needs adjusted. If his HP got adjusted, I do think that could jump him up, several placements on this list. I also do think Frieza's a sort of character where, I did say there are several characters where I think, the more you play them, you're going to really benefit from experience. I mean, getting more experience on any character, obviously, you get better with them, but whereas a lot of characters I think are easy to pick up, easy to learn, Frieza, I think there could be some curve there. Maybe I didn't unlock all of his power, but I don't think he has enough right now where he's really one of the better characters in the game. Now, that being said, I don't know if I'd say anyone is just straight up bad, whatever. That's why I have the quotes around Gohan. I think he's the worst character. I think he needs improvements. But I can't say he's necessarily bad because you can beat the best characters in the game with him. I think you could beat the best characters with anyone. But I mean, that's just because the level lead can get really OP in this game. But I think, as we move up, we go from these characters needs, they need buffed. These characters might need buff. These characters are more or less fine. These characters might need nerfed. And then like the character I have at the top, I do think just it's fucking ridiculous. Um, but obviously we'll cover that once we get there. But yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think Frieza's necessarily bad. I think he could be really good. I think he could be a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with him. But I just he needs his HP adjusted. I think is what I would say that really stands out to me. Otherwise, I actually do really like him. But next we do have Piccolo here. So Piccolo, right? I do think. Now he's another character similar to Frieza, where I think Frieza could require a lot of playing to sort of unlock mastery. I think Piccolo's probably the one character that well, another character. I think there might be another one or two I'd say it could apply to, but just like Piccolo, Frieza, I do think both of them are in the same sort of boat as they definitely feel like the characters that might be the hardest to pick up. I do think if someone really dedicates themselves to being gonna be a Piccolo main, they get 50 games in on Piccolo, 100 games in on Piccolo, whatever, right? They really learn him. I do think he could be pretty good. His traps, I mean, they're very powerful. The arm grab, right, that serves as both a good way to chase and escape. I mean, his range is pretty insane. The passive, lowering the cooldowns. The special beam cannon, if you land it, does a lot of damage. Like, I do think Piccolo is... I think he can be good. You just need to learn him. And that is really the thing. Is, once again, I do think any character in this game can be good. I think maybe Piccolo, Frieza, whatever, could benefit from some buffs. Gohan, especially. But I don't Gohan really needs them. These guys are more like, I mean, they could. I think Frieza needs the HP. I don't know what I'd really say Piccolo needs. I feel like he could have something else to really help him, but I couldn't really, place my finger on it. He does pretty good damage. The trap. I really like the trap he has. But I don't. He definitely. I suppose maybe the good way to sort of word it is he has to work a lot harder to accomplish things than the other attackers do. So that's more or less why I have him so low. Okay, now next I did want to, for our last character of mid, and I think this might be potentially, I'm not exactly 100% sure, but I think this could be potentially a little controversial. And I do have Boo here. Once again, I'm not really a technical player. I do know that sort of bias is there. And I think potentially that influences my opinion of Boo somewhat. I mean, Boo doesn't really, at least in my experience, do like a lot of damage. But he definitely is pretty good. I mean, the heals, right? The sort of like debuff, with like slowing the enemies and stuff. Like, he could do really cool stuff. He could be really helpful. But he's, and to be fair, I mean, this is a network test. We only had the beta before. We don't know when the official game is releasing. And I do think it is also worth noting. League is like the big MOBA game I know. I know there's like another one that's pretty big is like Pokemon Unite. I don't know what all that's on though. But point being, I think it's definitely possible. There's a lot of people that are new to MOBAs that were playing the sort of network test because like, oh, it's Dragon Ball. It's a team fighting Dragon Ball game, and this is pretty cool. So I mean, maybe there's also that sort of angle to consider. But it's just like, I kept running into teammates, even, which thankfully they did listen, even without, like, a lot of the bots that were really plaguing the game last time. I do think, teammates can be very annoying. And Boo is like, he's the most, like, support-esque character I think there really is, because he's not, I think a lot of, Gohan, Gohan just doesn't really feel like he has, like, a big identity. Um, Krillin does a lot of damage. We'll cover Krillin later, but Krillin does a lot of damage, obviously while having his pretty insane debuffs. I think the same can really apply to Frieza. Boo is more so just focused on healing and debuffing rather than, like, damage. So he is, I think he can be really good in the hands of the right player. But, when everyone in this game can do so much damage, especially, like, the later levels, and, you're on the top lane, right? And sure, you have him healing you, but you need to be one of the best characters in the game to have his heals really matter, to be able to withstand the blows from the enemies, I think is what really stands out that makes Boo so low. Like, I think maybe individually Boo could be higher, but you do have to consider, you're having 2v2s, and it's just like, at least in my experience, it seems like whatever team has Boo there, it doesn't really tend to win the most often, because just the damage that everyone can do in this game, like, it gets way too crazy, and I get that that's probably sort of the idea. It's a Dragon Ball game. They want to fulfill the fantasy of, even in OG Dragon Ball, right? The moon, or wasn't the moon destroyed in OG Dragon Ball? I know it was in the Saiyan Saga. But they've been having feats of destroying planets, moons, right? All this shaking the galaxy, right? All the Dragon Ball characters are known for these insane levels of power, and I think they really want you to feel that. But, if you don't have a lot of damage, that really does hurt you, and I think that applies to Boo. Okay, I think enough is said there. Next, I do want to pull up our first character for the good tier. And I do think that character is Bojack. Bojack. He is interesting, in the sense that I think he might even potentially do, like, less damage than Piccolo. I do think he's easier to learn than Piccolo. But really, what stands out to me about Bojack is just, through having his second and third ability, like, he can just really effectively zone off, like, XP. His cooldowns aren't that long, right? I at least in my experience, I found that when I'm playing Bojack, I'm really able to effectively control, like, all the XP sort of minions you find, to the point where, while at first, when we're on even terms, I may not be doing the craziest stuff to the enemy, once you start getting a couple minutes into the match, 5 minutes in, whatever, I'm able to zone off all the XP so much, we're able to get such a huge level lead that the enemies start to be able to get to the point where they really can't do too much. So, like, I think that's really effective. And once again, I think he might, and I could be, a little mistaken about this, but I think, at least in my opinion, he seems to be not doing, like, overall, I think he probably does the least damage of the attacking class. But the way he can, like, allow you to farm up, I do think really makes him stand out. Honestly, he feels sort of, at least to me, more like he'd fit as, like, a technical character. But I don't know I mean, that is another thing. I mean, like, even like with tanks, a lot of the tanks can do pretty insane damage in this game. And you'll notice, we haven't even gone over a tank quite yet. So, I mean, they're definitely more so up here. But it's like, I don't know how they like really decide like the role identities for these characters. But I feel like Bojack honestly feels a lot more like a technical to me than an attack. He's really specialized on helping you get the level lead, and I do think he does a pretty exceptional job at it, which allows you to win the late game pretty easily. Another thing, like his ultimate, it can do pretty good damage. I mean, you definitely need to catch them in the beam for a while, and you can catch a lot of people with the sort of 5 beams. So I think that's pretty cool. But I've also had, and to be fair, with the Bojack, I mean, a lot of characters have insane mobility with this game, but it's sort of a dual-edged sword, his ult. Like, I found for myself, and even for, like, enemies I'm facing, even, sometimes, like, seeing it happen to my allies, where, like, you activate the ult, and they just, like, run behind you and start hitting you in the back. And it's like, because his ult lasts so long, you're kind of just stuck there taking the punishment. So, I think he can do good damage. I think he's, like, a really exceptional at zoning. It really helps you get the level lead. But I do think he's probably one of the weaker attackers. I think he'd more so fit in the technical class. And I mean, as you can see, I mean, we have 3 technicals under him. So I do think he'd be a pretty good fit for the technical class. Once again, I don't really know how they decide all those sort of things. I cut briefly there. But it's time to continue on. Now, I do think the next character I have, well, that's better than Bojack, but, the next character to cover, I do think, is our first tank so far on the list, and that would be Khalifa. Khalifa is I actually really like her. She seems like a lot of fun. When I was playing Khalifa, and she's one of the last characters I tried. Obviously, I had that video go up last. So she's definitely one of the characters I played the least amount of times. But from my experience with her, I would say she stands out to me from the other tanks in the sense that I feel like she actually feels like a tank. And what I mean by that is, if you'll notice, once again, we're 6 characters in now, and this is our first tank. A lot of the tanks, you probably know from your experience playing, can do insane damage. And they are also pretty tanky. Khalifa, on the other hand, I think is more so of a traditional tank, where she doesn't do the most damage, but she has, like, the most insane amounts of survivability of anyone in the game. Like, I had, several occasions where I'd be, fighting, 3, 4 of the enemies at the same time, right? And I'd just be eating it forever, right? I mean, no one can do it like her in terms of survivability, at least in my opinion. She definitely seems pretty good in that regard. Now, she is, like a full-on melee character, which I do think actually also holds her back because, well, I mean, her ult can get to long range, but while having low damage and also being a melee, I do think, once again, she's an exceptional tank. And she's more so of a traditional tank, at least what I and probably other people would think of as a tank, than the other tanks. But, I mean, that is sort of an issue because, I found for myself, as well as, like, enemies and allies, it seemed to me that she does have a sort of problem, like, actually finishing enemies off. You definitely, and it is a team game, to be fair, but you definitely need to play around your team most of the time. in order to actually be able to secure the kills, which, team game. But I mean, that does also play into what I said before, as I do know a lot of people are newer to MOBAs. Um, so we'll have to see, how it is once people, the game's officially out and people are trying it and they're learning their mains and all that good stuff. Uh, we'll see. But, I feel like with what experience I do have of her, I did um, lose more than I lost with other tanks. And like my performance, I thought for the most part was usually pretty good. And while I did have, the games where I'd have good teammates, I also had the games where I'd have people I'm like, what are you doing, bro? Like, it's like, the enemy's dead, the base is open, and they're like hitting like a Cell Junior, for example. Or like, you know, they die and I'm still fighting by the time they get up. And instead of coming to help me, they're hitting the Cell Junior. So I don't know. I found, and we'll have to see. This will definitely impact how I feel about characters, several characters, once the full game releases. But I just think a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with the sort of genre, and they make a lot of questionable decisions because of it. And I think that really does hurt her because while she is very tanky, a lot of characters have a lot of damage, and she doesn't have a lot of damage. So she can only do so much, I think. But I do really like her. It just, either she needs to maybe do a bit more damage, teammates need to be a bit better, or the enemies need to do less damage. I mean, one of the three I think is pretty good. I do think though she's probably, like, if you're playing with a friend instead of like random, she's probably potentially one of the better tanks. Simply because you do have that communication, you do know what the person's doing. But you know, it's really, it depends on if people get better. If they like implement like a rank system. Like if you were playing her in like ranked, I mean, I know they have the grade, but it's not like a real rank system. If you're playing her in like a rank setting, and you are in higher ranks, I do think the higher rank you get should probably be better. But I think that's enough said on Khalifa. Next, I do have Goku here. Goku's pretty good. Goku, for like an offensive character, seems to have pretty good survivability. He has pretty good offense. He has pretty insane speed, with like the Kaioken. I do like how you can combo all that stuff. I mean, like, his alt range gets pretty huge. Like, all of his abilities feel pretty powerful. He feels like a good character. I don't really have too much to say about Goku. I feel like he's just sort of like middle of the road. Pretty basic, and I mean, he is like the first character you unlock, so that's probably what they want. But I mean, he feels like one of the more basic characters. Good damage, the movement speed's probably very insane, especially for other offense characters. But I mean, he doesn't really feel like he stands out to me in like any one category, especially compared to the attackers that I have above him. But I mean, overall, I mean, he's pretty good, but pretty basic. I think they sort of nailed him. I don't think I'd really change anything positively or negatively about him, at least in my experience, both playing and facing him. So I actually think he's probably one of the better balanced characters in the game. He can be both very good to play and also, very fearsome to face, while never really feeling overpowered. So I like him. Not too much to say though. He's pretty balanced. I think that's pretty good. Next, I do have our second tank, Cooler. Uh, Cooler is very interesting. So he's definitely a lot of the tanks going up, obviously, and do insane amounts of damage. And Cooler, with his retaliation mechanic, I mean, that thing is so busted. It's so fun. Now, Cooler actually, I do think fits more so in with like Piccolo and Frieza. I mean, this was I was sort of mentioning earlier. I feel like he's definitely a character where the more you play him, you're gonna benefit a lot more from, like if you want to main Goku, that's cool. But I mean, I don't think you're really learning too much more with Goku. You know, playing your 10th game versus your 50th game. Well, I do think like Frieza, Cooler, um, Piccolo are all characters where literally the more you play them, the more you're gonna get better with them. Because I mean, for those characters, I mean, just timing and positioning and everything, really is like an important deal. And I mean, for Cooler specifically, I mean, you do need to play around your retaliatory, whatever mechanic, to do the best. I mean, if you're not playing around that, he can look kind of weak. Um, but if you're playing around it, you're facing someone who's playing around it, and they're doing an exceptional job. I mean, he damn near feels like he's pretty hard to kill. But I do think that's actually fairly balanced, all things considered. I mean, having a character where they have a low floor, but like a high ceiling. So I mean, they really do vary in just how skilled the player is with them. I do think is a good thing. I mean, I don't really like his cooldowns. They're fine. Right? I mean, his abilities they do really good damage. Um, the AOE's like it's all he feels really good. I just once again I do think he's sort of more so in the middle of the road for me. Because he can like vary so widely. Uh, I do think there could be a fair argument for him being lower. I also think there could be a fair argument for him being higher. It really depends on the amount of experience you have when you're playing him, or the enemy has when they're playing him, whatever. Uh, he's definitely probably even more so than like Piccolo and Frieza. I do think he just really can. Well, maybe not Frieza. I don't know. Frieza's Frieza. I don't know. He's the most sort of unique character, I think. But I do think the more you play him, the more you're gonna get better, and he can be one of the better characters or one of the weaker characters. So I just sort of middle of the road, I think, is a really good spot for him. Okay, now finally we do have our last character for the good tier here. And these are, once again, I think these are all the characters that I'd say are like the most balanced. I do think like a few of the characters from upper echelon might be considered balanced, but they're just like strong. And I don't know. We'll cover them when we get to them. But for our last character, the best character in the good tier, I do have Zamasu. Now Zamasu in the original beta was top 3 best characters in the game very easily. He was insane. They definitely cooked with him. Like I think in the you'll notice some of these 3 of the characters I'm going to mention aren't here yet. But I think in the original beta, like the top 4 characters, and I don't know what order I'd necessarily say, but maybe like 18 Vegeta, Krillin, Zamasu, something like that. I do think were like the best characters of the original beta. Now, I mean, in the original beta, and once again, it's been a bit, and there could definitely be a thing of like, okay, there's not as much bots now, so, I mean, now that you're fighting like real people, that could, sort of sway how you feel about them. But I don't know, Zamasu's like the one character in particular. I mean, there might be tiny like number adjustments across the board, uh, but I couldn't really tell for anyone else. But like Zamasu specifically, I don't know what it is. They don't have like a patch notes you can look at, so I don't know if they actually did change anything, or it's literally just because they more or less like took bots out, comparatively at least to what it was. So I mean, fighting like actual people all the time, I don't know, but he definitely feels like he dropped off the most with this new beta. I still think he's good. I do have him as the best character of the good tier. I do think he's pretty balanced. The survivability he has is pretty insane. Like his debuffs, the slow, while also being able to do pretty good damage. I do like that. He feels like a pretty good character, but he just, I don't know what it is exactly, once again, but he just, at least in my experience, both, playing him, facing him, he did seem to be not as strong as I remembered. Maybe I am just like misremembering. I mean, there is that, I guess. And to be fair, there are several new characters, right? So, I mean, just by sort of the fact that there are newer, better characters, he does get pushed down. And maybe I'm just like, okay, there's so many characters above him. Now he feels weaker and he's not actually. I don't know exactly where it is, but he does feel weaker, at least to me. I still think he's good. But really, really good damage, really good tanking. The movement sort of reduction is pretty powerful, but he does feel weaker than he did when, the sort of initial beta was here. So I do still like him, though. Okay. Now, though, we are going to move into upper echelon. Now, I do think probably like a couple of the characters here are pretty balanced. But it starts to become, definitely a lot more questionable, at least in my opinion. Now, starting out here, I actually do have as our sort of worst character Super Saiyan Trunks. Trunks is insane. Like, the amount of burst damage this guy can do, like, it's nuts. Like, you go to fight him, you're like, oh, it's a half health Trunks, and then like you're full health, and then he just like he hits you like twice, and you're dead before you even know what happened. You're just like, what the hell? What happened? Where'd I go? Where's my health bar? So he definitely is pretty insane in that regard. He feels more so like, and we'll see if they give like further classifications to characters. But if you look at like League of Legends, so this is the the attacker class, Trunks, Bojack, Goku, Piccolo, right, that we have so far here. I mean, there's a lot of like attackers you have in like League. You have your fighters who do pretty good damage. They're pretty tanky, more or less. They're really good at staying in the fight, but they're more so better, like with 1v1s. You have your sort of like ranged, you're like ADCs, right? They do really good damage, but they're also really squishy. And then you have like, like assassins, which do the most damage. They're also the most squishy. Usually they have to like jump right on you. And I think that's the sort of thing of Trunks. I mean, he feels like an assassin, more so than like any other, character. Like, he does insane high burst damage, but he has to get right up close to you to do it. And the trade-off is he has really long cooldowns. So it's like you can take like one character out, but you need to like leave after that, because if you don't, I mean, they even tell you in game that because they give this sort of brief description of the characters. They even really say that about him. Like, he's an insanely high burst damage attacker. But the trade-off is his cooldowns are really long. So if he launches his abilities, he's probably going to get a kill, but he's also probably going to be pretty exposed after that. Which does make me think he's the sort of worst character of the tier. But by no means, I mean, all of these characters are definitely like where we're starting to talk about insane levels of power. at least in my opinion. All right, but next up, I think we do have for the next character of the upper echelon here, Vegeta. Now, there we go. I was gonna say. Now Vegeta is actually kind of, I don't know. I feel like everyone knows what Vegeta already is, and this does apply. Obviously we haven't put Krillin or 18 on here yet either. I think this applies to really all three of these characters. They were really good in the original beta, and they're really good now. And obviously they're all good for their individual reasons. But I mean, Vegeta, he's a pretty insane tank. I do think maybe I think like Khalifa is just like outright the best like at actually tanking. I do think like Zamasu's probably the second best, and I think it's either Vegeta or Cooler, and it depends on who's playing Cooler. But I think Vegeta's probably maybe like third best tank, just like an outright taking punishment. But he does insane amounts of damage, unlike the other tanks. I mean, like Cooler can do pretty good damage, but like Vegeta, like he is that guy. He has the finger point, and he has it for a reason. He thinks he's that guy, and this is like the one time where he does the finger point, and he's right. I mean, just being able to pull people away or pull people towards you, push them away, right? Just insane amounts of damage. You could snipe them. I mean, he's a melee range sort of character, which also just can hit you from far away, right? I mean, he sort of does everything. He's like a jack of all trades, and he's pretty good at it. I don't know. There's not really a lot to say about him negatively. Like, I don't think I have like a single negative thing to say about Vegeta. He pretty much does just about everything, and he does feel very strong. But I do think the other characters, potentially can feel stronger, I suppose, that are above him. Now that being said, I do think so. My next character, I pretty much think. I mean, you could. I'm not even sure myself, honestly, where exactly I'd have them. You could swap both this character and Vegeta around, and that character is Dabura. From what I've seen, heard what other people say, I think maybe potentially I'm a bit higher on Dabura than others. I don't know. I definitely, once again, I mean, I think you could very easily, be like, yeah, actually, I think, Dabura is, and to be fair, I mean, within one placement, it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But this is like the one spot where I'm like, I mean, either way, I don't really care. I think they're both really good. So, I mean, you could even have it like this. But for Dabura, he is interesting in the sense that I don't think he's doing as much damage as, like, Trunks, right? I do him above Trunks, but I don't think he's doing as much damage as Trunks. I think, if anything, he probably does damage more so around the level of Goku, which is, pretty good, but, I suppose how you could, like, divide it is, like, and Piccolo's weird, but maybe, like, Bojack, Piccolo, Goku, Dabura, Trunks, right? Sort of something like that we have so far. I don't know. Dabura, while not doing as much damage as, like, Trunks, I found, the sort of utility of his abilities, the fact that he can, hit you from so far away, while also, like, the petrification, it is so strong in my experience. Like, it lasts so long. If you get petrified, you're pretty much dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. Which probably is the intention, but I've only had, literally like once or twice, both for myself, when I'm playing Deborah and when, Deborah is fighting me, an enemy is playing him, where you actually manage to get away. And that's pretty much when he like all in, used all of his abilities to get the petrification off. And he doesn't have any of them up, and you have a lot of health still. Like, there's not a lot of situations where you can manage to get away from Deborah when he has the petrification, and I really value that, because I think he has huge sort of AoE like abilities where he can apply it to a lot of people. He just needs to be close to you and it's passively applying. And when you're petrified, I mean, he just incinerates you. So like I feel like they definitely cooked with him. I mean, obviously you do have to be close. You have to land your abilities for the petrification to be able to go off. But I mean, that ability just, it seems so strong in my experience that even though I think maybe he's not as hard hitting as some of the other attackers, he definitely makes up for it once you have that debuff active. Like, I don't know. I think I probably played him the most of any of the characters this iteration of the beta. I just had so much fun with him. He definitely, I think they cooked with him. They took a low sort of hype character like Deborah and made him like have his own unique thing, which feels strong. But I do think it's also not like, maybe they could like lower the amount of petrification by like a second, maybe a second and a half, something like that. I don't know though. Like, it feels really strong, but it also doesn't feel like it's insanely overpowered, I would say. So I think he's pretty good. I really like Deborah. Alright, next I do have Krillin. Krillin, like I said, I'm not a big fan of like technical characters. I do think like BoJack might be a sort of fit, at least as far as I see it, for a technical character. But, I mean, it does feel weird that they have like 4 and like the attackers have so many characters. So I do wonder what exactly that is all about. But BoJack sort of feels like maybe more of a technical to me. But I mean, Krillin, he, I mean, what doesn't he do? The solar flare, like being able to completely limit what enemies can do. You can hit them from so far away. His traps, like the sort of guided missile thing he can do, like, just overall, I mean, Krillin is pretty insane. I do think he definitely does fit as like a technical, but he's like a technical attacker. I don't know, like he just, in the original beta and now in the network test, I mean, he's him. And it's just like I don't know. I really think they cooked with Krillin. I don't know if I'd say he's OP. I mean, he's definitely one of the better characters in the game. I think once you really get past, like, I don't know, maybe anyone, I don't think this really applies to like Deborah, honestly. So maybe honestly even something like this, just on like Deborah, I do think, well, I don't know, maybe it's hard for me to say. But I think Deborah is more or less, I'd say, is balanced. I think Trunks is balanced. Maybe once you start talking about like Vegeta and up, I do think that's the point where it's like, okay, maybe this character needs a nerf of some sort. Krillin, I mean, he feels so strong, even with the addition of 6 new characters. I mean, he still feels roughly about as strong as he was in the original beta. He does his thing so well. Like, even, me, I don't like technicals. I really like him. Like, I don't think he's as good at, like, zoning as, BoJack. I don't know. I mean, they definitely both have a similar role in that, but Krillin, he's less about, or at least how, when I see him, he does less so of the zoning and just more outright, he'll kill you. Like, he'll get the level lead from killing you. He doesn't need to starve you of XP like Bojack does. He just kills you outright, and it's pretty crazy. I don't know. He's definitely very strong. Maybe they could definitely probably nerf him, but I don't know. I feel like I really like him. He pretty much, I don't know if I'd say he has the most survivability in terms of like his health, but I think he makes up for that with like the solar flare. Like it is so strong. Every time I'm hit by it, every time I hit people with it, every time I see my allies hit with it, like that ability genuinely feels like one of, if not like, I don't want to say the strongest ability in the game, but it feels like easily like a top 5 strongest ability in the game, even including like ults, at least in my opinion. Like that debuff, just limiting the vision so much, the fact that he can hit you from so far away, like it's such a deadly combo that you can exploit. So Krillin, insane. Now, the next 2 characters I have in upper echelon. And this next one I do think is upper echelon, but you definitely could convince me of God tier. We'll talk about the other character next, but the character after this character, but the character I want to have here now is Majub. Majub is insane. Now, at least in the games I got with him, the games I faced him, he definitely feels like the character to me that like benefits the most from just like leveling up. I don't know if that's, I suppose, necessarily true, but it definitely feels that way. He feels like he starts out, a little weaker, but by the time you're getting to level 9, 10, like he can do insane amounts of damage, like just for free. He can dash at you very fast. The sort of the blast like returning and stuff. Like once you get, and it's not like the games last too long, mind you, but once you get, quote unquote, later in the game, I don't think anyone can match him. But I do think, while being one of the, honestly, I'd say while being the most snowbally character in the game, the sort of weakness he has is he does need to snowball. So, if you don't play right in the earlier game while you're weaker, I definitely think the enemies could allow you to get to the point where you can never scale. So, I mean, he's a bit more risky, at least in my experience, in the early game, as opposed to like other attackers. But once you actually like get towards the middle to end part of the game, I genuinely think he could be considered, and I think this does apply to like all 3 of these characters. But I really think the first place character, I mean, it is so insane. But I think Majub could definitely be like the best character in the game. Man, if you say it, like I could definitely see it. But I think he does need to scale, which I think puts him in 3rd instead of 2nd or 1st. Okay, now next we do have for our final character of upper echelon. Although honestly, I don't know. I could see. I'm definitely really conflicted about this character. And that character is Android 18. So I suppose we can just fill in the last 2 here. I'll talk about him in a moment, but I think Baby's the best character in the game. Now 18, I don't know. I could definitely, see her being God. I could also see her being upper echelon here. I'm not really sure, even myself. I'm a bit conflicted, because she's insane. I don't know. She maybe does deserve God. She is so insane. Like what she could do, she cooks. 18 cooks. But it's like, imagine Trunks, like how Trunks plays. She's like Trunks if Trunks didn't have long cooldowns. That's how I feel about 18. Like, she definitely feels like a sort of more assassin character, like Trunks. But in a game like League, assassins are balanced because they just have like a long cooldowns, and that's what Trunks has. I think Trunks is balanced, even as strong as he can be. 18 does not feel balanced. I think like Majube's late game doesn't feel balanced, but like I don't know, for his early game feeling as weak as it does, at least to me, I think it's sort of fair. But like 18, like is she just like the whole game she could just like one hit you. Like she just comes in with a roundhouse kick and is like, what the hell happened to me? And she could just spam that thing. Like she doesn't even have to wait, like 20 some odd seconds like Trunks or whatever. She hits you and she hits you and she hits it and she's just non-stop. Like she is definitely like what she could do. It's so crazy. Like the damage. Like I do think maybe she could be considered a little squishier than some of the other characters, but like she makes up for that with pretty good mobility. Escape tools, whatever, while also being able to just like incinerate you and spam the incinerate. She is definitely really strong. I think if Baby wasn't in the game, obviously I'd still have her as the best character. Like she was the best character before. I think she's more or less still the best character now. She definitely needs some sort of nerf for because if they like add a ban phase, like like a rank system to this game, like I promise you, she'll probably be banned every game. And now that does leave us with Baby. I don't. What were they thinking? See, that's why I eventually have him in a tier of his own. Like, I don't know. I'm still conflicted about having 18 up here because Baby, it's just. Baby is so insane. This character is like, if you play League, if you've watched League or whatever, he feels like if Viego and Yumi were just combined into one champion. Or one, like, character, whatever. Like, it's being able to sit in your ally and grant, the lifesteal while also regenerating, while also doing insane amounts of damage for free. And then also being able to take over enemies after, like, they die, like, after you kill them with the rush. Like, it's such a crazy combo. Like, Baby damn near seems like unkillable for the most part. Baby definitely needs nerfed. I just like 100. Like he could honestly even get like a new kit. I don't know. They need to do something. Like re-spec him into like a technical character, make him not as tanky. Maybe take like the sort of Viego like enemy possession thing out. I don't know what exactly to say, but like they gotta do something. He is so strong, and it's not even close. Like I don't know. I'm really talking myself more into putting 18 down again, but I don't know. She could even like a Baby ally. She can do insane damage. So I don't know. Like he's pretty. Well, I feel like he has some of the least tankiness outright. The fact that you could just go into your allies as often as you can, and then you just like freely regenerate while giving them lifesteal and doing insane damage in them. Like you just level that ability up as to level 3 as soon as you can. Don't even like worry about your ult. Just level that ability up. Like it is so busted. That man is way too strong. He's a lot of fun. I think I played him and Debora the most of this beta. They're both a lot of fun, but even while being fun, Baby, he's definitely, it's okay to have some sort of toxic mechanic as long as there's like a draw, there like a downside to it, a weakness to it. I don't know if Baby has any weaknesses. I maybe he's not as tanky as some of the other tanks. I think you could say when he's just like outright fighting you, but you're not supposed to be outright fighting the enemy. You're supposed to be going in your allies, to give them the lifesteal and regenerate. So like I can't even say that's a negative. That's just like if you're outright fighting the enemies, like you're probably playing them wrong. Like you really should be sitting in your allies as much as you can. Like it's so strong. So I don't know what else I can really say. I feel like most people probably agree more or less with this, top 3, 4, 5. It's just he's so crazy. They need a balanced team. Like if we come back, 2 months or so, like we have another beta or the official game's out, he still feels as strong. I feel like that could definitely be pretty worrisome for the game, but we'll have to see. They could definitely they seem very receptive of feedback, so who knows? But he is just so strong. He's so busted. Which can be fun, but it's also I don't know. It feels way too good. But I think that about wraps up the sort of tier list here. This is kind of long. I wanted to try and give as much as my thoughts out as possible on all the characters. I do think for the most part they are all, quote unquote good, or at least they all can be good. I think even like Gohan could be like just Baby like on a straight 1v1, but as long as Gohan is like a 2-3 level lead, whatever. But then once again, I don't think you're playing Baby right if you're just doing like a straight 1v1, so like that situation is pretty much never going to arise. Even like I mean it's definitely a lot more questionable, but like 18, I think like even Gohan could be right. Like the level lead seems so important in this game, but like talking on like even level terms, like I feel like Gohan definitely needs buffed. I think Frieza needs buffed. A lot of the other characters, I don't know if I necessarily say they feel like they need to be buffed. There are always going to be stronger and weaker characters in a MOBA. I feel like, going from like Vegeta up, you could say I feel like these characters need nerfed, and I think I'd agree, for like all of them. But I think, like this sort of middle tier I think is pretty balanced. I think Piccolo, honestly, these are characters that like I feel like they're pretty good as they are. It's just people need more experience with them and with the game. But I feel like more or less most of the characters feel like really well done. It's just like, some of these upper characters, I think the numbers need to be adjusted. And they need to be transparent about that too. They can't just like shadow like, oh yeah, we nerfed him. Like they do need to say what the numbers are and what they or what the numbers were and what they're dropped to and all that good stuff. But I think we'll obviously see once the game comes out. But I think that about wraps this up here. Let me know what you guys think, of the placements here. I don't know if I saw, a lot of people's thoughts but online, but I'm not really, I didn't like go searching for everyone's. I saw like a couple of tier lists other people made. I'm not really sure if any of these are like really big controversial. I do think, more or less, like these 5 characters probably feel pretty strong to like everyone. I feel like Frieza and Gohan feel pretty weaker to most people. But I mean, Dabura to like Piccolo, I think is probably could vary widely for a lot of people. So I don't know, but I don't know. I'm really excited about the game. So we'll have to see it once again. I think there's a lot of changes that should be made for it. But it's not even out yet, so I'm not going to start like really going into all that. Like they do seem very receptive to feedback, so I'm not really worried about the game. I think it will be really good. A lot of people were worried about Toshi being on the balance team. because Legends is kind of a bad spot, or at least it was. He was the producer of Dokkan for the early years when it was pretty bad. But I think they've really cooked with Gekishin, so I'm pretty pleased. I'm pretty excited, looking forward to whenever it releases. But I think that'll do it here. Once again, let me know what you're thinking about the spots for who you think the best, worst characters are, whatever. But I'm gonna end this here. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Take care.